Hello, everybody. This is literally round 3 of me trying to film this video. You might be wondering why it would take me 3 tries to make a video about what I read in March and April, considering it's May. And the answer is I film the video and then I go to edit the video and it feels like contrived and forced, and not because like I'm forcing myself to read things to have content, but more so like the fact that I read and then know that I have to talk about the book after. Like deep inside of me, I'm like, I don't want to, like, I just want to read and read for myself. But then I remember that the whole point of my channel is kind of to document this, my reading journey. So I said, round 3, let's be more open and actually share the struggle in the intro. So I have my list right here of the books that I read. This is from March and April. So far in May, I haven't finished anything. I've only been reading Demons. First book that I finished way back in March was 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. As I was reading it, I was thinking I need to read it in Spanish immediately. And I went and I bought it once I finished it and read like 15 pages, and they were, I don't want to say better than this, but amplified by 100. More vibrant, more everything. I just didn't finish it. I think it was too soon for me to read like the same story again, even though it's like in a different language. But that being said, I loved this book and I loved it like from the beginning until the end. And it kind of reminded me of Pachinko and even the biography Stalin's Daughter by Rosemary Sullivan, where you feel like you've lived like 5 lives and you start in one place and you end up in another and look back, and it's just like an entire lifetime, and many lifetimes have gone by. So I love reading a book like that. In this book, pretty much all of the main characters, all of the male characters that live in the house have the same names, and like the same names get passed down. There's Aureliano and Jose Arcadio. And despite a lot of people having the same name, and despite there constantly being new characters like paraded in, paraded out, each one is so distinct, and I didn't really struggle differentiating between them because I think everybody is just so their own person. And it's kind of weird because I don't think that any of the characters really act how normal people would act. And despite this being like a tight-knit family, like they're all living in this house together for the most part, being a, well, I don't know if it's like a Colombian family exactly, but it's definitely a Latin American family. There's like a weird divide between all of the characters where really like it feels like solitude does play a massive role in this story. And despite the characters loving each other, caring for each other, like there's always like walls that they can't penetrate when it comes to each other. It's not really ever redundant, but you kind of get into a lull in the middle where things are definitely happening, but I just didn't know where I was going. You know what I mean? Like 300 pages of 8 different family members at the same time, like new babies, new everything, like just constant motion, constant emotion, war, death, and whatnot. And then you get to the end and it's like all of a sudden there's only 2 people left, and then all of a sudden it's all gone, like it's all over. And it's just like, the second book that I read I don't have with me, but it's Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion, and I mainly read it because I know that this book had such a big impact on Bret, Easton, Ellis and really changed the course of his writing. I mainly read this book because I like to read what influences my favorite authors. Most of the essays, like, I thought they were good. She definitely was an amazing writer, amazing journalist, had a way of capturing things that might even be difficult to communicate, painful, like the suffering of others and whatnot, drug use, etc., and like talk about it in such a detached manner that there's like a whole new feeling that comes into play. I don't know how to explain. That being said, I don't really remember too many of the individual essays. I really loved a couple. Mainly I loved the one about self-esteem and I loved the one about Joan Baez. I don't really know too much about her, except that one time my aunt asked if I could store her records for her, and she had like 30 Joan Baez albums. So yeah, but just like her stance on politics, being okay with being uncertain about things and not feeling like you have to define where you stand, or at least define it like with specific terminology, you know, like it's okay to say, I lean this way, I just haven't read enough, you know. I wouldn't reread it, but it was pretty good. Okay, since you guys are watching the video and like I've probably in the future edited this all together so it's clean, you don't actually realize that I cracked the code, and instead of trying to like speed run a video and film everything at once, I've been taking separate videos for each book, and now I'm like no longer stressed by a non-existent time constraint. So like if this video is even posted on YouTube and you're hearing this, we succeeded. So the third book I read was Poor Things, and I read this after watching the film. I saw the film in the theater, and it was a packed theater, and it was just an amazing experience. Everybody was laughing at the same parts together and gasping at the same parts. When I read this, I was kind of expecting to like find a lot of discrepancies with the film, and maybe like since I love the film so much, this wouldn't be as good or exciting, but honestly, I think this takes the story a step further than the film, and the book itself as a way to like bring the story to life with images. This book is divided into three. The first third is basically the author, narrator, saying like, I'm a historian and I'm presenting what I have found when I was like going through this archive or something that was throwing stuff away. And then in that archive, the narrator finds a manuscript for the book. I think it's called Poor Things, but it's basically Max McCandless's account of like his time meeting Godwin Baxter, meeting Bella Baxter, Bella, you know, getting engaged to him and then leaving with Wedderburn, and then her notes to him and to God as she's traveling throughout Europe and the world and learning things. Men are trying to impose themselves on her and impose their ideology onto her. So all of that was so strong, and I felt that it was just as communicated as it was in the film. And I think Bella's voice also shines through, and I think having seen Emma Stone's performance like helped me a lot, like kind of get a sense of who Bella is supposed to be and like how she's behaving, and you know what it's like to have a toddler brain, or not even toddler, like literally a baby brain. And then the last third is actually Bella's response to Max McCandless's account, and she's referring to herself with her like dead person name. I just realized that maybe I shouldn't have said that. But it doesn't even like get brought up in the movie, so honestly it would only matter if you're reading the book. But basically what I'm trying to say is that the ending is left a lot more unclear in this, but overall the writing, the world, the characters are all just as lively and lovely as they were in the movie. So I really enjoyed this. Then the next book that I read was La Parabola de Pablo by Alfonso Salazar, I think. But I read this book like at the peak of my hyperfixation with Pablo Escobar, 1980s in Colombia. My aunt's husband, who is not related to me, his brother was a politician that was assassinated by Pablo Escobar's order. So this is like a story and a history that has been around me my whole life. I've always known about it, always heard about it. But I think especially with shows like Narcos and stuff, it's so easy to just think that it's a one-dimensional issue where it's like just drug trafficking and nothing more. But the book that I read was basically the Holy Grail and the Bible for the show on Netflix, Pablo Escobar, El Patrón del Mal. So I was watching and reading those two things at the same time and really learning about Pablo's influence on the government and the war that he waged against the government and the Colombian state. And Colombia is a country that has never really known peace, and there have always been more than two opposing parties. They have their own conservative and liberal parties that have been violent towards each other, like for hundreds of years. But along with that, there are like paramilitar groups, guerrilla groups, just people clashing at all times. So I really got a lot more insight into what was going on in the 70s and 80s and then 90s, this really tumultuous period, but not even the most tumultuous period in Colombian history. It's one that is frequently referenced. I mean, you think 80s, you think Coke, you think Colombia. And that's actually kind of sad and something that my family really resents. So by like learning more about the history of that period and all the different factors and moving parts that came into play allows me to like step outside of it and see it for what it was and understand also like the people from that generation who are now like grown adults, their views on drug policies and things like that. So overall, an amazing book, and the copy that I read was like a 2023 reprint, so it had a lot more interviews and just like new information that has come up. It was just very, very cool. And then the next book, I literally want to spend no time talking about it because I feel like I talk about this book all of the time, but I read the SHARDS by Bret, Easton, Ellis for the second time, but the first time like actually reading the physical book, and I loved it as much as I did when I listened to the audiobook. I've watched every single interview of Bret talking about this. I know, or I mean, I can't know everything about it, but I feel like I know as much as is humanly possible to know about this book. And, you know, a lot of people hate it, and I get it, but I love it. And then the next book that I read, I listened to the audiobook on Palestine. It's Noam Chomsky, and he's like in conversation with somebody else. I can't remember who. And this was a book that I read because I just like really urgently wanted to learn more about Israel-Palestine, and I felt like I was hoping that this book would really like cover the historical aspect for me, and it did not disappoint at all. I mean, it's pretty short. It was like a 5-hour audiobook, and the first third of the audiobook is a recounting of the history of the region and really debunking like a lot of the shit that you hear and a lot of things that you hear Zionists say in defense of the Israeli state, and just like very effortlessly proving that it's not a complex issue. It's really actually very simple. Like the actual Zionist movement, when it first arose, like the two words in Hebrew that were used to describe the project were settling and colonizing, and like I just think it's as simple as that. And obviously like I feel like I could really go into it, and I have strong like thoughts and opinions. I have been deeply emotionally impacted by the genocide in Palestine, and not a day goes by that I don't think about it. And I don't mean like not a day goes by that I don't scroll on Twitter and see stuff about it. No, it's like when I'm by myself at night, like trying to fall asleep, like I think about it and it pains me and it hurts me, and it's really like something that I don't take lightly at all. I just want you guys to know that it's important to me and that I liked this book. I liked this book, and it was really informative, very clear, and no hate to Noam Chomsky because I love Noam Chomsky. But like if you're somebody who is American or something and like you have family members that you want to maybe help become educated about this topic or whatever, and like it's people that only will listen to something that comes out of a white person's mouth, like this is the perfect book for them. And that being said, like I want to read books by Palestinian authors, not just fiction and poetry and things, but actually like learn about the history from their mouths directly. This was just like what was available to me on Spotify, so I went for it. But yeah, I would still highly recommend it to anybody. Okay, I just want to say that my new method of recording this video is going very, very well. I'm like under no stress, and that's a first. The next book I read was En Agosto Nos Vemos by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This was his last published book. Yeah, I mean, I heard that his kids published this even though he didn't want them to, and I'm just kind of like, why? I didn't think it was bad, like it's not poorly written at all, but I didn't really care for it at all, if I'm being honest. I mean, the story is this woman who basically goes on an annual trip every year to visit her mother's grave and cheats on her husband annually, but he's also cheating on her, so therefore there's like some justification that's presented to us. I read it in like one sitting. It's very short, and there's really nothing that I can even say about it. Like, I just didn't feel anything. Bro, let's go. Like, I'm making good ass time. Like, literally the other times that I filmed this video, it took me like 40 minutes, and it was just word vomit. So anyways, then the penultimate book that I read was Blue Lard by Vladimir Sorokin, because I've been saying Sorokin because that's just how I read it in my head. This was hard for me to get into at first. Like, the first 20 pages, I was just like, bro. Like, I knew that I had to surrender to this book and that it's not a logical book. It's like a conceptual, surreal thing. But once I got past those 20 pages and I just like actually accepted what I was reading, and there was like a moment where they're talking about a sewing machine that sews 3 people together at once. Like, when I read that, it like all clicked into place. Like, it was the first thing that actually made sense to me, and I just like fell in love with this, because what I love about this is what I love about Mission Impossible movies, which is very random. For example, like Ghost Protocol. When I go to watch that movie, I'm excited because I know like we're about to be in Dubai, we're about to be like, I don't even remember, but we're about to be in like 4 different countries. There's constantly like a change in the story, a change in the setting, like a change in the form, and that's what this is like. Like, the first part of this is in the form of letters from a scientist to whomever, and they're like speaking with the Russian, like Chinese dialect or whatever, and the glossary in the back of the book is like a joke. Like, it doesn't really explain anything, so you kind of just have to fucking read it and accept what they're talking about, even though it makes like no sense. But then once the lab is like invaded and the Blue Lard is taken, all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, new narrator, new reality, and like the Blue Lard is being like passed around in this briefcase, so it does give it like that spy movie feel, or at least to me it did. It's pretty crazy. Like, I don't even know what I can say on here. Like like, so crazy. Somebody has a penis that like they have to throw over their shoulder. Crazy. It's unlike anything that I've read before, and I want more of this. I read The Blizzard by Sorokin and loved it, but that was more of like a common type of story that you would expect. Like, there's crazy shit that happens and surreal things that happen, but for the most part, like, the structure of the story is like something that I've seen before, right? But this is really unlike anything I've ever read before. And I realize that I have said a whole lot of nothing, but that just means that you should go read it. Alright, and then the last book I read was Other People's Clothes by Calla Henkel. This book was recommended to me, and I started reading it and actually became obsessed, loved it. Like, I read it in 1.5 days. Like, this girl, her best friend was murdered, and she's moving to Berlin to study abroad. And she moves in with this new girl, like, who goes to her school, but they hadn't really been friends before. And they have like the relationship that I've experienced, where it's like you have a roommate and you don't know them, but just like due to the fact that you live together, you become so close so fast. I thought the female characters were like complex, interesting, like they develop friendships with other women, and they're not like pristine, perfect women. Like, they're complicated, they are wrong about a lot of things, they are seeking pleasure, they're seeking fun, they're seeking popularity, and I just was stunned by it. I thought it was great. And then you kind of like start to realize the subplot is like they think somebody's living in their apartment, and it made my stomach drop, and it was really bizarre. And they start basically hosting parties at their apartment as if it were like a private club. So what I loved about it is like the parties themselves are like performance art, and they like the costumes and the design and the props and everything that they have are all like so they can photograph it and make a fiction become a reality, even though for the people that attend the parties, like, it's just a party. And then you get to like the last half and it's like, oh, becomes contrived, corny, obvious, and looking for a way to shock without staying true to like how characters would actually behave. So all of a sudden it ends and it's like you get answers to all the mysteries, but it's so like shoved like, oh, okay, like this improbable reality, yeah, that's what happened because that's what's most shocking. And I just felt so cheated, and I would have much rather just like read 300 pages of nothing, like no plot, just watching these girls like get fucked up in Berlin and, you know, learn about themselves, their sexualities, etc. But that being said, if you like books that are thrillers, like shit like The Silent Patient and stuff, like this is perfect. And it's actually better than, you know, The Maidens and Silent Patient. I haven't read Silent Patient, but I was asked to read The Maidens and I was like, please don't ever make me read something like that again. But this was like actually well written, style wise and like prose wise. So if you like a thriller, you like a crazy shock, but want to read something that's actually good, this is the perfect book. So yeah, that's everything I read in March and April. And I know that I'm posting this like literally in the middle of May, but okay, here's a little bit of a jump scare at the end of this video because I am announcing membership tiers for my channel. I am eligible for it, and you know, I figured why not. So for $3.99 a month is oomph level, and oomph level will get you access to members only videos. For a while I've been thinking like, I'm not gonna make a podcast, but I do like to just talk and rant, and I figure if you want to be a member of my channel, you probably are interested more like in me as a person and like what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what I'm listening to, etc. Those would just be videos of me talking about what I'm reading, perhaps a reading vlog. If y'all emailed me, I would definitely respond to email questions and things in these videos. So that is the first tier. And then the second tier is friend level for $6.99. And this includes early access to new videos, the member only videos, and then member only live streams, because I think it would be fun to like actually have a group of people who like are not just randos and like be able to be on live, talk about books, give recommendations, and like actually have connection. The third level is the book pogo patron level. So this level is $19.99 a month, solely because if you pay for that, you are literally a patron to my education. Mama's going to grad school, so I'm just leaving it there as an option. And the only other perk that you get for that level, in addition to the perks from the other two levels, is I will be your Twitter mutual, because I used to have my Twitter in my link tree, and I just decided I didn't want anybody to be my Twitter mutual. So if you're really my patron, we can be oomphs on Twitter. So if any of you decide to become members for my channel, I am deeply, deeply grateful, and I hope nobody feels cheated or like I'm trying to make money off of y'all. Like, it's just an option that's there. But yeah, I also have my tip jar in my link tree if you just wanted to do a like one-time donation of any kind. Again, I'm not trying to beg or ask for money. It's just an option that's there. All proceeds literally go straight to my grad school fund. So it's not going to be going to waste. Trust. So yeah, thanks.